Oh, I don't know. I mean, could have come off maybe a couple cemetery tombstones. Maybe the phone book.
Bob Dylan was always known as the quiet prophet of American music, the Nobel icon everyone dreamed of working with. But at 83, he shattered that image with a confession nobody saw coming. He revealed a secret list of 7 artists he hated the most, and the names shocked the entire industry. Collaborators, close friends, even idols. They praised him in public, yet were erased from his life behind closed doors. And once you hear why these relationships collapsed, you'll understand why they swore they'd never stand beside each other again. Paul McCartney, the Beatle, Dylan couldn't forgive. At the very top of Dylan's hate list, the spot nobody expected, sits Paul McCartney. Yes, that Paul McCartney, the most beloved Beatle, the man everyone assumed Dylan admired without reservation. But nothing like that. And once you know what happened, the reaction suddenly makes sense. The crack appeared in 1987, long before feuds were headlines. McCartney was doing a routine interview talking about melody, pop structure, and the changing state of music. Then the reporter casually brought up Dylan's recent work, the darker, more experimental songs Dylan had been wrestling with. Paul laughed lightly, shrugged, and said, "Bob isn't writing songs people can remember anymore." It was soft, almost playful. But to Dylan, it wasn't playful at all. It was a bullet. People forget that Dylan in the mid-80s wasn't bulletproof. He was fragile, exhausted, and coming out of a decade of spiritual turmoil. He was redefining himself. And when one of the most influential musicians alive implied that his new work lacked staying power, Dylan felt humiliated. A close friend later recalled Dylan muttering, "He wanted to be Lennon. He never understood me." It wasn't bravado. It was Dylan drawing a boundary. The fallout happened quietly. Plans for a collaborative mini-tour suddenly died. Private meetings were canceled. McCartney didn't understand why Dylan never confronted him. But insiders knew exactly what caused the freeze. Fans kept hoping for a reconciliation, but those close to Dylan swear it never happened. Lennon had been the Beatle Dylan truly respected. Sharp, cynical, unpredictable. Paul was the opposite. Polished, careful, adored, built for charm. To Dylan, that charm felt dishonest. Eric Clapton, the guitar hero who tried to take Dylan's throne. The second spot on Dylan's hate list belongs to a man he once spoke highly of, Eric Clapton. And the wild thing is this: Dylan didn't start off disliking him at all. The dislike came fast, sharp, and from one moment he never forgot. People close to both men still talk about the night it happened. It was late 1978 inside a cramped rehearsal room in West Hollywood. A handful of musicians were hanging around after a session. Clapton was relaxed, warmed up from a long day of playing, talking louder than usual, and he dropped a sentence that hit the room like a broken bottle. "Dylan's losing his bite. Someone's got to step in eventually." The people standing there froze. One of them later said he didn't say it angrily. He said it like he was stating a fact, and that was worse. And of course, that fact reached Dylan within 24 hours. Because in the music world, nothing stays quiet. When Dylan heard it, he didn't explode. He didn't even look surprised. He just nodded slowly. And according to a bassist in the room, he said something only once. Funny how people change when they think they're catching up. That line wasn't aimed at Clapton's talent. It was aimed at his ambition. The fallout was immediate. A session Dylan and Clapton were scheduled to test out disappeared from the calendar. Calls went unanswered. Messages were ignored. Clapton tried asking around, and finally one engineer told him straight, "Whatever you said the other night, Bob heard it." Clapton tried to fix it once during a 1981 festival. He walked toward Dylan backstage, hands slightly raised, ready to speak. Dylan saw him, tightened his jaw, turned his back, and walked the other direction. Clapton looked genuinely stunned, like he just realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was permanent. Joan Baez, the folk queen who broke Dylan's trust. What exactly pushed Bob Dylan and Joan Baez from being the most powerful duo in folk music to barely speaking for decades? That's the question fans still whisper about. Because the break wasn't just artistic, it was personal, painfully personal. Their feud started with a moment Joan thought was harmless. During the chaotic mid-1960s when Dylan was reinventing himself, Joan publicly said he was turning away from the people who need him. To the world, it sounded like a comment about music. To Dylan, it felt like a knife from someone who knew his private doubts better than anyone. The real fracture hit during the 1965 UK tour. Joan expected to join Dylan on stage as they had done many times before. But when she arrived, everything was different. Dylan's staff wouldn't give her a slot. Dylan himself wouldn't commit to a duet. According to one crew member, Joan confronted him in a hallway and said, "Are you really shutting me out?" Dylan reportedly replied coldly, "This isn't your show." That wasn't just rejection, it was humiliation. A few nights later, Joan realized Dylan wasn't just moving in a new direction artistically. He was cutting her loose. She later said, "He didn't owe me anything except honesty." Dylan never apologized, never explained, and that hurt her more than any headline. But that wasn't the end. Joan took the pain public. She spoke in interviews about Dylan losing his way, about him abandoning activism. She didn't attack his talent, she attacked his integrity. And that was the one thing Dylan guarded more fiercely than his fame. People around Dylan said he felt exposed, almost betrayed, that the person who knew his insecurities had turned them into ammunition. He never yelled about it. He simply erased the possibility of working with her again. Managers who suggested a reunion were shut down immediately. Dylan later said, "She used my doubts to shame me." Their silence lasted over 40 years. Even their reunion at the 1975 Rolling Thunder Revue didn't heal the wound. It only made the tension visible. Cameras caught them smiling, but not connecting, performing together, but not trusting. Lou Reed, the punk poet who mocked Dylan's soul. Lou Reed earned the 4th spot on Dylan's hate list the moment he opened his mouth in 1974. He went straight at Dylan's identity, and Dylan never forgave him for it. The moment happened during an interview Reed gave while promoting a Velvet Underground project. The journalist asked him about Dylan's impact on songwriting. Reed didn't pause. He fired off a line that still echoes today. "Dylan never meant anything to me." Then he added another blow. "His lyrics are smoke and mirrors." People who heard the full interview said Reed wasn't joking, wasn't jealous, wasn't even angry. He said it with the same flat, cool tone he used when talking about amp settings and guitar distortion, and that's exactly what made the comment sting. It wasn't personal for Reed, but it became deeply personal for Dylan. When the remarks reached Dylan, he didn't lash out. He didn't speak back. What he did was colder. According to someone who worked on his 1970s tours, Dylan nodded once and said, "Let him talk. Silence will answer him." And that silence became the feud. Dylan wiped Reed from his world. No public shoutouts, no acknowledgments. Musicians who tried to bring up Reed in conversation said Dylan would change the subject instantly, like flicking ashes off a cigarette. The tension quietly intensified a decade later. In the early 90s, during a Rolling Stone interview, a journalist casually mentioned Lou Reed. Dylan looked up, smirked, and asked, "Who?" It wasn't a joke, it was pure dismissal, the kind artists fear more than an insult. Reed heard about it later and reportedly rolled his eyes, saying, "Of course he said that, but it bothered him more than he admitted." And here's the twist, almost no fans know. Reed once told a friend, "Dylan was too insecure to take me honestly." Dylan heard that too. After that, the door was closed for good. Leonard Cohen, the poet Dylan loved, then resented forever. Leonard Cohen holds the 5th place on Dylan's hate list, and it's the most painful one because this feud didn't start with mockery or ambition. It started with admiration. Dylan genuinely loved Cohen's work. He praised him publicly, called him the highest level of songwriting, and spoke about Cohen with a softness he rarely gave to anyone. And that's exactly why what happened next felt like a betrayal Dylan couldn't shake. The breaking point appeared quietly in the early 1970s. Cohen, being interviewed in Paris, was asked about Dylan's early writing. He smiled politely, thought for a moment, and said his early songs were a bit adolescent compared to the poets I admire. He meant it academically, not maliciously, but context didn't matter. That single word, adolescent, hit Dylan like a slap. People around Dylan say he reread that quote several times, not believing Cohen had said it. This wasn't a rival or a provocateur. This was the one songwriter Dylan genuinely feared because Cohen's writing touched depths Dylan respected. Hearing Cohen downplay his early work felt like hearing a mentor whisper, "You were never as good as you thought." During a chance meeting in New York years later, Cohen tried small talk. Dylan stayed cool. detached. Cohen later told a friend, "Bob speaks in riddles." But insiders say Dylan simply didn't want to open the door again. He couldn't trust someone who had once cut him in a way critics never could. Their artistic rivalry only grew more complicated. When Cohen released Hallelujah, Dylan praised it publicly, performing it in concerts but never reaching out privately. When Cohen complimented Dylan's simplicity of the heart and songwriting, Dylan ignored it, nothing more. To everyone else, it felt cold. To those who knew Dylan, it was deliberate. The wound from that old interview had never closed. So tell me, which name on Dylan's list shocked you the most? And which feud do you think should have been resolved? Drop your thoughts below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next untold story behind music's biggest legends.